Here in What Hi-Fi, we've already brought you a look at a couple of bespoke in-car audio systems from British speaker manufacturer Bowers Wilkins. We've seen and heard systems in the Volvo XC90 and the BMW 7 Series, to name but two. But an SUV and an executive saloon is one thing, a £160,000 supercar is a completely different proposition. And we've been looking to spend the last couple of days behind the wheel of the new McLaren 570 GT, getting to know its Bowers Wilkins audio system. There are a couple of things that you first notice when you lower yourself into the car. First of all, it's quite a minimalist, clutter-free place to be, and that's been deliberately done by McLaren to remove all the necessary components and make the interior as uncomplicated as possible. And it's this simplicity that's mirrored in the McLaren's infotainment setup. For example, there's no CD player, but there is a radio and a 30GB hard drive onto which you can transfer files from a USB memory stick. There's also 3 USB inputs, so you can hook up a phone through a wired connection, but you can also stream over Bluetooth wirelessly. You'll also notice there aren't actually any controls on the McLaren steering wheel. Now, this isn't necessarily a bad thing, you just mainly interact with the system through the 7-inch portrait touchscreen, which uses a heavily modified version of Android. Unlike a lot of cars you see today, which use quite wide landscape screens, McLaren, as we've just said, uses portrait. Now, this is specifically done so it doesn't intrude into the space of the car, and it actually doesn't have a massive negative effect on even using it. It's quite responsive, you can tap it, but also you can swipe to change track, which comes in especially useful when you're playing music through it. Also, if you do a quick scan of the interior, you'll notice a couple of key technologies that actually screen Bowers Wilkins. In the side doors, you've obviously got the yellow Kevlar mid-range drivers, which are behind acoustically transparent grills, and you've also got the tweeter on top, which you can find sat in the middle on top of the dashboard. Now, this tweeter on top technology we've seen before. We've seen it in the Volvo XC90, and basically it involves isolating the tweeter from the rest of the dashboard and obviously getting it to fire straight out towards the driver and the passenger. This helps to create a more clear, open sound, and it means that the high frequencies don't have to bounce up and reflect off the windscreen, which can create some serious technical issues. Now, the system in the 570 GT has actually been tuned by the same guys at BMW, responsible for the 800 series diamond loudspeakers. Now, in the car configuration, you've got 12 speakers, 14 channels of Harman amplification, and 1,280 watts of power. Now, this compares to the 8-speaker 240 watt system that you get as standard in the car. Obviously, you've got the tweeters, you've got 3 tweeters, front, left, right, and the tweeter on top. You've got mid-range drivers, left and right in the doors, and below those you've got 20cm carbon fibre composite woofers. And in the back, you've got 2 tweeters and 2 more of those mid-range drivers. If you go into the audio menus, you're going to be greeted by 3 different presets which you can use to change the sound of the car to suit your personal preference. Those are driver focus, studio, and stage. Now, driver focus does pretty much what it says on the tin. It gives you a more concise and clear sound stage, purely just from the driver's perspective. Placement of instruments and voices is much clearer. If you swap down to the studio arrangement, this setting's more for when you've got a passenger in the car. It gives you a more symmetrical sound through the middle of the car, so both passenger and driver are kind of getting an equal amount of detailed information and sound stage. And then last but by no means least, you've got the stage setting. Now, stage setting uses Harman's quantum logic surround processing, which starts to feed more information through the back speakers into the front, so you get that kind of more immersive surround sound feeling. So our pick of the 3 sound presets will probably be driver focus, of course, but we quite happily live with studio, and you don't sacrifice too much when you've got another person in the car with you. Now, stage is okay, but it does sound a little bit disorganised and vague, and it's not quite as clear or open as the other 2 settings. So how does the system sound? Well, it's a really expressive and powerful setup. As we've come to expect from Bowers Wilkins in-car audio systems, those mids and highs are exceptional, especially with the tweeter on top technology that really helps those high frequencies breathe, brings a lot of detail, and kind of really shows up those lesser systems that aren't quite as capable in that department. Another thing we'd probably like is just a little bit more clarity and a little bit more detail in the low frequencies, just so it kind of matches the impressiveness of those mids and highs. When it comes to designing a supercar, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the in-car audio performance will fall way down on the list of priorities, but this collaboration between McLaren and Bowers Wilkins actually goes to show that couldn't be further from the truth. And at just under £2,000 for this particular system, in the grand scheme of supercar buying, that's got to be considered quite a bargain. If you've enjoyed this video, then don't forget to click like, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, and you can also add us on Google+.